The grease under Maria Santos's fingernails had become permanent black crescents that wouldn't scrub away no matter how hard she tried at the end of her shifts. She'd been on her feet for 14 hours straight at Ruby's Highway Diner covering Linda's morning rotation because Linda's kid had the flu, then her own evening shift because rent was due in 3 days and she was $40 short. The fluorescent lights above the counter had started buzzing around hour 10, a sound that burrowed into her skull and made her temples throb with every step she took across the black and white checkered floor. November air bit at her cheeks when she finally pushed through the back door into the alley behind the diner, cold enough that her breath came out in visible clouds, but not cold enough to freeze the puddles collecting in the cracked asphalt. Midnight had come and gone an hour ago. The highway beyond the parking lot hummed with the occasional semi-truck, their headlights cutting through darkness like prison, searchlights sweeping for escapees. Maria dragged the last trash bag toward the dumpster, her shoulders screaming in protest, her lower back sending sharp signals that she'd pushed her body past what it was designed to endure. She heaved the bag toward the dumpster's open mouth, and that's when she saw him. A boy, maybe 16 or 17, crumpled against the brick wall like someone had tossed him there and forgotten to come back. His body was twisted at angles that made Maria's stomach lurch, one arm trapped beneath him in a position that couldn't be natural, his hoodie pulled up over his head despite the cold making it impossible to see his face clearly. For a second, just a second, she thought maybe he was sleeping off, a drunk or high one of the kids who sometimes wandered back here, looking for a place to crash away from the truck stop lights. Then she saw his lips. Blue. Not coal blue, but oxygen-starved blue, the color of suffocation. Maria's heart kicked against her ribs hard enough to hurt. She dropped the trash bag and moved closer. Her sneakers splashing through a puddle she didn't register until ice-cold water soaked through to her socks. "Hey, can you hear me?" No response. Not even a flicker. She knelt beside him, her hand hovering over his shoulder before she forced herself to touch him. His hoodie was damp, not from rain, but from sweat that had soaked through the fabric and then cooled in the November air. Her fingers found his neck, pressing gently against the pulse point she'd learned about in the mandatory first aid training Ruby made all the waitresses sit through. There. Weak, thready, but there. A pulse that felt like it was giving up, like it had been fighting too long and didn't have the strength to keep going. Maria's mind raced through her options with the cold calculation of someone who'd spent 28 years learning that the world didn't stop to help people like her. Call 911. That was the normal response, the civilian response, the thing people were supposed to do when they found dying kids in alleys. But the ambulance would take 20 minutes to get out here, maybe longer if they were coming from County General, and this boy didn't look like he had 20 minutes. His breathing was too shallow, too irregular, the kind of breathing that preceded the kind of not breathing that couldn't be undone. His phone was half visible in his hoodie pocket, the screen cracked like a spider web that had caught something too heavy and broken under the weight. Maria pulled it out carefully, her hands shaking now, adrenaline flooding her system in waves that made her fingers clumsy. The screen was locked, password protected, but the emergency function still worked. She pulled up the emergency contact screen. One entry, just one. Dad, Iron Brotherhood MC. Maria's hand froze. Her thumb hovered over the call button like it had suddenly become radioactive. Iron Brotherhood. She knew that name. Everyone within 50 miles of Route 47 knew that name. The motorcycle club that ran the back roads between Arizona and Nevada, the one with the reputation that made even the truckers nervous, the one her manager Ruby had warned her about during Maria's first week 3 years ago. You see those leather jackets with the iron cross and the skull? You keep your head down, pour their coffee fast, and don't ask questions. They're not like the weekend riders. These are men who've done things. Ruby's voice in Maria's memory had carried the weight of experience, the kind of knowledge that came from surviving 40 years in truck stop America, where violence simmered just below the surface of every transaction. But this was a kid. A kid who might be dying while Maria stood here paralyzed by a name on a phone screen, while she let fear override the most basic human imperative to help someone who couldn't help themselves. She thought about the ambulance, about 20 minutes, about the blue lips and the weak pulse, and the way his chest barely moved with each breath. She pressed call. The phone rang once, twice. On the third ring, a voice answered. Male, deep, rough as gravel, dragged across concrete, suspicious in the way people got when unknown numbers called them after midnight. Who is this? Maria's voice came out smaller than she'd intended, shakier years of foster care and powerlessness leaking through despite her attempts to sound competent. I found a boy. He's unconscious behind Ruby's Highway Diner on Route 47. His phone says you're his dad. Silence. Not empty silence, but the loaded kind, the kind that pressed against Maria's ear through the phone connection and made her acutely aware that she just stepped into something she didn't understand. I don't have a son. The words were flat, absolute, carrying the weight of someone who knew their own life and wasn't interested in being told otherwise by a stranger. The phone says, Dad, Iron Brotherhood MC. I'm looking at it right now. He's really hurt. I think he's been here a while and what's he look like? The question cut through her explanation like a blade through paper. Maria shifted position, trying to see the boy's face more clearly under his hood. Maybe 16, 17. Dark hair. I can't see much else. He's wearing a black hoodie and jeans. He's got defensive wounds on his arms and... Where are you exactly? The voice had changed, still rough, still commanding, but now carrying urgency that made Maria's own pulse quicken in response. Ruby's Highway Diner, Route 47, about 15 miles west of the state line. The alley behind the building. Don't move him. Don't let anyone take him. I'm 10 minutes out. Should I call an ambulance? He's really... 10 minutes. Stay with him. The line went dead. Maria stared at the phone, then at the boy, then back at the phone, like it might provide some explanation for what she'd just agreed to. She'd told a biker she didn't know that she'd found his son, except he'd said he didn't have a son, which meant either the phone was wrong or the biker was lying, or Maria had just inserted herself into a family situation that was none of her business and potentially dangerous. She should call 911 anyway. That was the smart choice, the safe choice, the choice that meant she'd done her duty as a citizen and could wash her hands of whatever happened next. But something about that voice on the phone, about the way it had shifted from denial to urgency in the space of seconds, made her hesitate. If she called an ambulance now, they'd take the boy before the biker arrived. And if the biker really was this kid's father, if there was some explanation for why he didn't know he had a son, then taking the boy away before that explanation could happen felt wrong in ways Maria couldn't articulate, but understood in her gut. She shrugged off her jacket, the thin windbreaker that was all she could afford, and draped it over the boy's chest, trying to keep him warm without moving him too much. Her fingers found his pulse again, counting the beats, telling herself that as long as she could feel them, he was still alive. As long as there was a pulse, there was hope. Your dad's coming. Just hold on. Whether he could hear her or not, she didn't know. But the words felt necessary, like speaking them out loud made them more real, made the promise more binding. Minutes crawled by like hours. A truck rumbled past on the highway, its air brakes hissing as it downshifted for the curve beyond the diner. A dog barked somewhere in the distance, 3 sharp sounds that echoed off the buildings and then disappeared into the desert night. Maria kept her fingers on the boy's pulse, kept counting beats, kept breathing when her body wanted to hold its breath and wait for whatever was coming. Then she heard it, the growl of a motorcycle engine approaching fast, getting louder. Not the polite putt-putt of weekend riders, but the deep, threatening roar of something built for power rather than comfort. A single headlight swung into the alley, bright enough to make Maria squint, harsh enough to throw everything into sharp relief. The trash bags, the puddles, the boy's pale face finally visible as the light hit him directly. The engine cut off. The sudden silence felt louder than the noise had been. Boots hit pavement, heavy and deliberate, and then a man walked into the light. He was exactly what Maria had pictured, and nothing like it simultaneously. Tall, over 6 feet, with shoulders that belonged on someone who'd spent years building physical strength through work rather than gyms. His leather jacket had seen decades of wear patches and insignia, covering every inch, the Iron Brotherhood logo prominent on the back, a skull with crossed wrenches rendered in silver thread that caught the headlight. Salt and pepper beard covered half his face, neatly trimmed despite the late hour. A scar ran from his left eyebrow down to his cheekbone, the kind that came from stitches done poorly or not at all. But his eyes, those were what made Maria's breath catch. Cold and gray as winter steel when they first landed on her, assessing threat level and motivation in a single sweep. Then they dropped to the boy on the ground, and something happened to that face, something Maria had never seen on someone so physically imposing. The hardness cracked. Fear bled through raw and immediate and undeniable. Connor. The name came out like a prayer, like a plea, like someone calling out to a God they'd stopped believing in, but desperately needed to exist. The man Jax Maria assumed, though he hadn't introduced himself, dropped to his knees beside the boy with speed that seemed impossible for someone his size. His hands moved over Connor's body with practiced efficiency, checking for injuries, assessing damage, moving with the kind of competence that suggested medical training. What happened? The question was directed at Maria, but his eyes never left Connor. She forced herself to speak past the tightness in her throat. I don't know. I found him like this when I took out the trash maybe 15 minutes ago. He's been unconscious the whole time. His pulse is weak, and his lips were blue when I found him. Jax's jaw clenched hard enough that Maria could see the muscle jump beneath his beard. His hands continued their assessment, lifting Connor's hoodie carefully to reveal bruising on his ribs, defensive wounds on his forearms, marks around his wrists that looked like rope or zip ties had been there recently. Did you see anyone, any vehicles, anyone running? No, the diner's been dead since 11. I was the only one still here. I didn't see anything until I found him. Jax pulled out his own phone and dialed, his voice dropping into command mode, the tone of someone used to giving orders and having them followed without question. Hawk, Ruby's Diner on 47. I need you to run traffic cameras at the bus depot, the truck stop on Miller, and the warehouse district between here and the state line. Everything from the last 6 hours. A pause while someone on the other end responded. Because my son is lying in an alley half dead and someone's going to answer for it. Get me footage now. The last two words carried enough menace to make Maria's skin prickle, despite not being their target. Jax ended the call and finally looked at her properly, his expression shifting slightly as he registered her presence as more than just a voice on a phone. The hardness remained but gained an edge of something that might have been gratitude. You called. It wasn't a question, but Maria nodded anyway. I couldn't just leave him. Most people would have. Before Maria could form a response, Connor stirred. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused, dark brown, and filled with confusion and terror that hit Maria like a physical blow. They fixed on Jax with desperate recognition. Dad! The word came out slurred, uncertain, like he was testing whether reality matched what his eyes were showing him. Jax's expression cracked completely for just a second, naked emotion flooding his face before he could rebuild the walls. I'm here, you're safe now. Connor's breath hitched, words forming with visible effort. They found me at the bus depot. 3 men. They asked if I was Ryder's kid. When I said yes, his eyes rolled back and he went limp again, consciousness retreating before he could finish the sentence. Jax caught him before his head could hit the pavement, cradling him. With the kind of careful desperation that fathers used with newborns, they were terrified of breaking. Maria's voice came out urgent, cutting through whatever thoughts were consuming Jax. We need to get him to a hospital. County General is 20 minutes east. I know what he needs. Jax stood lifting Connor like he weighed nothing, holding him against his chest with both arms supporting him. He turned to Maria, his gray eyes pinning her in place. You're coming with me. What? No, you're the only witness. You found him. You called me, and if someone's watching this alley, they already know you helped. You're in this now, whether you like it or not. Maria looked at the boy's pale face, at the desperation in Jax's eyes, at her jacket still draped over Connor's chest. She thought about her apartment with the leaking faucet and the broken heater, about the $40 she was short on rent, about the double shift she had tomorrow that she couldn't afford to miss. She thought about all the smart reasons to walk away from this, to let the biker and his mystery son handle their own problems, to go back to being invisible Maria, who poured coffee and kept her head down and survived by never getting involved in other people's catastrophes. But she'd made the call. She'd chosen to help instead of walking away. And something about Connor's blue lips and Jax's cracking voice told her that walking away now would be the kind of decision she'd carry for the rest of her life. Okay, let's go. County General's emergency room smelled like industrial disinfectant, trying and failing to mask the underlying odors of blood and fear and human suffering. Maria sat in a plastic chair that squeaked with every movement, watching Jax pace like a caged animal in front of the intake desk. He'd carried Connor through the automatic doors 23 minutes ago, and nurses had immediately whisked the boy away on a gurney, leaving them both in the fluorescent-lit waiting area, with nothing to do except exist in the space between crisis and resolution. The night shift staff had taken one look at Jax's leather jacket, and their expressions had shifted from professional concern to wary suspicion. Maria had seen it happen 100 times in her years. Waiting tables the way people's faces changed when they decided you were trouble, when they made calculations about risk, and decided you fell on the wrong side of acceptable. Family only beyond this point, the intake nurse had said, her voice carrying the particular firmness of someone enforcing rules that weren't negotiable. Jax had looked like he wanted to argue to push past the desk and the rules and the clipboard-wielding authority figures standing between him and his son. But Connor had already disappeared through the double doors, already been absorbed into the machine of emergency medicine, and fighting would only waste time and energy that needed to be conserved for whatever came next. Now Maria was stuck. She'd followed Jax to the hospital in a taxi she couldn't afford $32 she didn't have, and the driver had left her at the entrance without waiting for payment, probably reading the tension radiating off Jax and deciding that being stiffed for the fare was better than being involved in whatever situation was unfolding. She had $3.47 in her pocket, no car, no way home, and the growing certainty that she'd made a catastrophically poor decision. A doctor emerged from the double doors, blue scrubs and tired eyes, in the particular posture of someone who'd been on shift too long and seen too much tragedy to believe in happy endings anymore. She carried a tablet, her gaze scanning the waiting room before settling on Maria. Miss Santos. Maria's head jerked up, surprised to hear her name. She'd given it to the intake nurse when they'd arrived, had filled out paperwork about finding Connor, because apparently being a witness meant becoming part of the official record. That's me. The doctor approached, her tired eyes taking in Maria's waitress uniform, the grease stains on her hands, the exhaustion written in every line of her face. You're the one who found the patient. Yes, behind the diner where I work. Jack stopped pacing and moved closer, positioning himself just behind Maria's chair, his presence looming without being overtly threatening. The doctor's eyes flicked to him, then back to Maria. Can you describe his condition when you found him? Any visible injuries? Smell of alcohol or drugs? Maria's voice came out steadier than she felt. No alcohol that I could smell. He was unconscious, not moving. His pulse was weak, and his lips looked blue, like he wasn't getting enough oxygen. I didn't see obvious bleeding, but I didn't move him much. Defensive wounds on his arms. Yes, and bruising on his ribs when his hoodie rode up, and marks on his wrists like he'd been tied up. The doctor made notes on her tablet, her expression carefully neutral, in the way medical professionals learn to be when discussing trauma. Jax's voice cut through the space, rough with barely contained frustration. You think some kid passed it out from dehydration with defensive wounds and ligature marks? The doctor's eyebrow raised slightly as she turned her attention to him for the first time. Sir, are you family? Jax's jaw worked, tension radiating off him in waves. I'm his father. Do you have documentation, birth certificate, custody papers, anything that establishes legal guardianship? The silence that followed was heavy enough to stop time. Maria watched Jax's face, saw something like agony flash across his features before he could bury it under the hard mask he wore like armor. I just found out he existed 3 hours ago. The doctor blinked, her professional composure cracking slightly as she processed that information. Maria could see her trying to fit this revelation into whatever bureaucratic boxes the hospital required, trying to reconcile a father who didn't know his son existed with the need for legal documentation before releasing information. I see. Well, without proper documentation, I can't release medical information to you or allow you beyond the intake area. Jax's hands curled into fists at his sides, knuckles going white with the effort of not putting them through the nearest wall. Then who's listed as his next of kin? Who am I supposed to get permission from? The doctor scrolled through her tablet, reading information that made her expression shift from bureaucratic detachment to something closer to sympathy. His mother, Catherine Brennan. We've been trying to reach her, but the number on file isn't. She's dead. The words fell like stones dropped into still water, creating ripples that spread outward and changed everything they touched. The doctor's fingers stilled on her tablet. Lung cancer, 3 months ago. Maria's chest tightened, pieces of a puzzle she hadn't known existed, suddenly clicking into place. Connor was 17, maybe 16. His mother had died 3 months ago. His father hadn't known he existed until tonight. That meant 17 years of secrets, 17 years of a woman raising a son alone, 17 years of a pound growing up without a father who apparently didn't even know he needed to be found. The doctor's voice softened the professional armor, giving way to human compassion. I'm very sorry for your loss, but I still need to verify the relationship before I can release information or grant access. A new voice joined them, making everyone turn. A police officer approached his uniform crisp despite the midnight hour, his badge catching the fluorescent light. He was Asian, maybe 40, with the particular wariness that came from years of not knowing what each call would bring. Officer Chen, I got a dispatch about a minor brought in with suspicious injuries. His eyes landed on Jax, and something like recognition flickered across his face. Jax Ryder. We met about 4 years back, after that incident on Highway 9. Jax's expression darkened, old memories surfacing. The one where I testified. Chen nodded slowly, his gaze moving between Jax and the doctor. Name on the intake form says Connor Brennan. You related to Kate Brennan, used to work at the clinic downtown. Jax's voice had lost some of its edge, replaced by something raw. You knew her. Good woman. Helped my mother when she had pneumonia, didn't charge her when she couldn't pay. Heard she passed recently. I'm sorry. Chen pulled out a small notebook, flipping through pages. Kate had a sister in Oregon, I think. Came to her memorial service. I could try to reach her, but it'll take time to confirm custody and legal standing. The doctor sighed, exhaustion and compassion warring in her expression. Fine. I need proper paperwork filed by morning, but given the circumstances and Officer Chen's verification, I'll make an exception for tonight. She turned back to Jax, her voice taking on the clinical tone of someone delivering difficult information. The injuries we're seeing aren't consistent with a simple collapse or medical episode. Your son has blunt force trauma to his torso, defensive bruising on his forearms, consistent with trying to block punches, ligature marks on both wrists, and significant dehydration. Someone hurt this boy deliberately. Maria's stomach dropped. She'd suspected as much from what she'd seen in the alley, but hearing it, stated clinically, made it real in ways that speculation hadn't. Jax's face had gone pale beneath his beard, his eyes burning with fury so intense Maria could feel the heat of it from 3 feet away. Where is he? Room 347. But Mr. Ryder, you need to understand. Jax was already moving toward the double doors, his entire body coiled with the need to see his son to confirm Connor was alive and being helped. Officer Chen held up a hand, stepping into his path. Let him see his son. I'll supervise. Document everything for the report. The doctor looked like she wanted to argue hospital protocols and liability concerns written all over her face, but finally nodded. 10 minutes. Then I need you back out here for a full statement. Jax disappeared through the double doors with Chen following close behind. Maria stood there in the waiting room alone, suddenly surrounded by the ambient sounds of the ER, beeping monitors, hushed conversations, someone crying quietly in one of the examination rooms. She should leave now while she had the chance. Call another taxi she couldn't pay for. Go home to her broken apartment. Pretend tonight had been a nightmare she'd wake up from when her alarm went off in 5 hours for her morning shift. But she couldn't make her feet move toward the exit. Couldn't shake the image of Connor's blue lips, of Jax's expression when he'd said Connor's name like a prayer. She thought about her own childhood, about all the times she'd needed someone and gotten no one, about caseworkers who'd rotated through her file without ever really seeing her. She thought about what it meant to be alone when you desperately needed not to be. So she sat back down in the squeaky plastic chair and waited. 47 minutes later, Jax emerged from the double doors. His face was carved from granite, but his eyes blazed with something Maria recognized from her own childhood in foster care. The fury of someone who'd failed to protect what mattered most and was just beginning to understand the magnitude of that failure. He walked straight to where Maria sat and stopped, his massive presence filling the space between them. He woke up, just for a minute. His voice was rough, scraped raw by emotion he wasn't trying to hide anymore. He said 3 men grabbed him at the bus depot yesterday morning, asked if he was Ryder's kid. When he said yes, they beat him, tied him up, kept him somewhere for over 12 hours. Then they dumped him in that alley. Maria's blood ran cold, pieces of the story arranging themselves into a picture she didn't want to see, but couldn't avoid. Why would they do that? Because someone wants to send me a message. Jax's hand shook, not with fear, but with barely contained rage that vibrated through his entire frame. And they used my son to deliver it. Maria stood slowly, her own exhaustion forgotten in the face of whatever nightmare she'd stumbled into. She should leave. Every survival instinct developed over 28 years of learning that other people's problems became your problems. If you weren't careful, screamed at her to walk away. I'm sorry, but I really need to go. I have work in the morning and... How long have you known him? The question cut through her attempt at exit, making her pause. Jax's eyes bored into hers with an intensity that demanded truth. What? Connor, how long have you known my son? Maria's own anger rose to meet his defensive walls going up automatically. 30 minutes before I called you. I'm a waitress who found a dying kid in an alley. That's it. I don't know him, I don't know you, and I really need to go home now. Something in Jax's expression shifted hardness, giving way to something that might have been understanding, or regret, or both. You're right, I'm sorry. He reached into his leather jacket and pulled out a worn wallet, extracting several bills without counting them. 20s, at least 10 of them, probably more. For the taxi, and for calling, and for staying when you could have walked away. Maria stared at the money, easily $200, maybe more. It was rent and groceries, and maybe enough left over to fix her heater before winter really set in. It was the difference between survival and actually living for the next month. It was also charity pity money from a biker who felt guilty that she'd gotten dragged into his mess. Keep it. Just take care of your son. She turned toward the exit, her legs trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline crash, desperate for fresh air and distance and the illusion of normalcy. Behind her, she heard Jax's voice, barely above a whisper, but sharp enough to stop her cold. They think you're with me now, which means you're already a target. Maria turned slowly, dread pooling in her stomach like ice water. What are you talking about? Jax's face was grim, his gray eyes holding hers with terrible certainty. Whoever did this to Connor, they're watching. They saw you find him. They saw you call me. They saw you come here with us. He paused, letting the implications sink in. I'm sorry, but your normal life just ended. Maria didn't sleep. She'd gone home at 2 in the morning, locked every door and window in her apartment with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, and spent the next 4 hours staring at shadows on her ceiling while her mind replayed Jax's warning on an endless loop. They think you're with me now. Your normal life just ended. When her alarm went off at 6:30, she gave up on sleep and got dressed for her morning shift, moving through her routine on autopilot. Ruby's Highway Diner looked exactly the same as it always did, neon sign buzzing, with its characteristic electrical hum parking lot, already half full of early risers and truckers grabbing breakfast before hitting the road. The normalcy of it felt surreal, like the previous 12 hours had been fever dream, and this was reality reasserting itself. Maria clocked in, tied her apron, grabbed a pot of coffee, and tried to pretend everything was fine. You look like hell. Ruby's voice cut through Maria's attempt at composure. The older woman stood behind the counter, gray hair pulled back in its usual bun, her weathered face showing concern that came from 20 years of managing a truck stop diner and learning to read people's troubles. Didn't sleep well. That boy they found in our alley. That was you, wasn't it? Cops came by at 4 asking questions. Maria's hands tightened on the coffee pot. I found him when I was taking out trash. Called his dad, that's all. Ruby's eyes narrowed, reading volumes in what Maria wasn't saying. His dad being Iron Brotherhood. Maria nodded, not trusting her voice. Ruby sighed, the sound carrying decades of weariness. You did the right thing calling for help. But Maria, those boys don't play by normal rules. You get tangled up with them. I'm not tangled up with anyone. I found a kid, made a call. Now it's done. Ruby's expression said she didn't believe that for a second, but she let it drop. Take booth 7. Mrs. Chen wants her usual. Maria slipped into the familiar rhythm of morning rush, pouring coffee, taking orders, delivering plates, smiling through exhaustion that made her bones feel like lead. The routine was comforting, mindless, the kind of repetitive motion that let her brain shut down and just exist without thinking about teenage boys with blue lips or bikers with gray eyes full of rage. She was refilling Mr. Patterson's mug, making small talk about the weather when the door chimed. Maria glanced up reflexively and her heart stopped. Jack's rider walked in. The morning sunlight streaming through the windows made his leather jacket look even more worn, highlighting every patch and scar in the material. He moved with the kind of confidence that came from never being afraid of a room, from knowing that his presence alone changed the dynamics of whatever space he entered. Conversations didn't stop exactly, but they shifted, became quieter, more careful. People tracked him with their eyes without appearing to watch directly. He crossed to an empty booth in Maria's section and sat down, his movements deliberate and unhurried. Maria's hands went cold around the coffee pot. Ruby was watching from behind the counter, her face tight with concern. Maria forced herself to walk over to pull out her order pad to pretend this was normal. "What are you doing here?" Her voice came out sharper than intended, fear manifesting as anger. Jax's gray eyes swept the diner, once assessing exits and threats before settling on her face. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept either, deep circles under his eyes that even his beard couldn't fully hide. Coffee, black. The word was loud enough for nearby tables to hear, loud enough to sound normal. Then quieter, just for her, "We need to talk." "No, we don't. I helped your son. That's done. I can't." Connor's awake, really awake this time. Stable. They're keeping him another day for observation, but he's going to be okay. Despite her fear, Maria felt genuine relief flood through her. "That's good. I'm glad. But I really need to." "He asked about you. The woman who found him. Wanted to make sure you were okay." Something in Jax's voice made Maria pause, made her actually look at him instead of just seeing the leather jacket and the reputation. She saw exhaustion that matched her own, saw worry etched into every line of his face, saw a man who just discovered he had a son and nearly lost him in the same night. She poured his coffee, the mundane action giving her hands something to do. "I'm fine. Tell him I'm fine." Jax wrapped both hands around the mug, his knuckles scarred in ways that told stories Maria didn't want to know. "I need to tell you what's happening. Why Connor was targeted. Why you're in danger now. I don't want to know. I just want to go back to, they think you're with me. They think you matter to me. And in their world, that makes you a weapon they can use." Maria glanced toward the counter where Ruby was still watching, toward the other tables where truckers ate their eggs and drank their coffee and existed in a world where the biggest problem was making schedule. She thought about her apartment, her bills, her carefully constructed life of invisibility and survival. "Who's they?" Before Jax could answer, the sound of squealing tires made everyone in the diner look up. Through the front windows, Maria saw a black SUV jump the curb, mounting the sidewalk, engine still running. Two men sat visible in the front seats, their faces obscured by the glare on the windshield. Jax moved before anyone else processed what was happening. He lunged across the table, his hand grabbing Maria's arm, pulling her down toward the floor with force that would leave bruises but might save her life. The brick came through the front window half a second later. Glass exploded inwards, showering the breakfast crowd with glittering fragments that caught the morning light like deadly confetti. Screams erupted, people diving under tables. Mrs. Chen's coffee cup shattering against the tile floor. Ruby was already reaching for the phone under the counter, her movements automatic from years of handling truck stop emergencies. The bricks skidded across the floor, spinning in lazy circles before coming to rest 3 feet from where Maria crouched beside Jax. Spray painted across it in red letters that dripped like blood, "Brotherhood dies." The SUV's tires screamed as it peeled away, disappearing down Route 47 before anyone could get a license plate. Jax was on his feet instantly, his hand moving to his back, reaching for something Maria suspected was a weapon before he caught himself, remembered where he was, what restraint required. Instead, he pulled out his phone and photographed the brick from multiple angles before anyone could touch it or move it. Maria's ears rang from the explosion of glass. Tiny cuts stung her cheeks where fragments had grazed her. Around them, people were standing slowly, checking themselves and each other for injuries, their morning routines shattered as thoroughly as the window. Ruby appeared from behind the counter, her face pale but composed. "Everyone okay? Anyone need an ambulance?" A chorus of shaken, "I'm fine" responses echoed through the diner. Ruby's eyes landed on Jax, then Maria, and her expression hardened into something that looked like betrayal. "My office, now." 5 minutes later, Maria stood in Ruby's cramped back office while her boss called the police. Jax waited outside the door. Ruby had made that very clear, her voice carrying the weight of someone who'd run this diner for 23 years and wouldn't be told what to do in her own establishment. Ruby hung up and turned to face Maria, her lined face showing the particular weariness of someone who'd seen too much and was tired of seeing more. "You want to tell me why bikers are throwing bricks through my window?" Maria's voice shook despite her attempt at steadiness. "I found a kid in the alley last night. I called his dad. That's him out there. And apparently his enemies think I'm involved now." "Are you—" "No, Ruby, I found someone who needed help and I helped him. That's all." Ruby was quiet for a long moment, studying Maria's face with eyes that had seen thousands of desperate people pass through this diner and learned to distinguish between troublemakers and the troubled. "You're a good girl, Maria. Best waitress I've had in 10 years. Always on time, never complain, work harder than anyone else. But I can't have gang wars in my diner." "You understand that?" Maria's stomach dropped, the floor tilting beneath her feet. "Ruby, please, I need this job. I can't— I'm not firing you, but you need to handle this situation fast. Whatever you're mixed up in, you get yourself out of it before someone gets killed." Ruby's expression softened, slightly sympathy breaking through the pragmatism. "I like you, Maria. I don't want to see you hurt. But I've got 20 other employees and customers who come here because it's safe. I can't protect you from men who throw bricks through windows." Maria nodded, her throat too tight to speak. When she emerged from the office, Jax was standing by the boarded-up window. Several truckers had already pulled plywood from Ruby's storage shed and were covering the gap. He saw her face and understood immediately. "I'm sorry." The apology was simple, sincere, carrying weight that mere words shouldn't be able to hold. Maria looked at the boarded window, at the glass still glittering on the floor, at her normal life crumbling around her like the fragments of shattered safety. "Explain. Right now. Who did this? Why, what the hell is happening?" Jax's jaw worked, internal debate visible on his face before he made some decision and nodded. "Not here. Somewhere we can talk without—" "No, right here, right now. You said I was in danger. You said they think I'm with you. Tell me who they are and why I should believe anything you say." Jax glanced around the diner at the truckers, who were still cleaning glass, at Ruby, watching from behind the counter, at Maria's face showing fear and fury in equal measure. He spoke quietly, the voice pitched for her ears only. "The Vipers, splinter group from Iron Brotherhood. 5 years ago, they wanted to turn the club into a criminal enterprise. Trafficking guns worse. My brother Jack and I refused. They killed him for it, made it look like an accident." Maria's breath caught pieces of a larger story arranging themselves into a picture she was starting to understand. "I testified against them. Put 6 Vipers in prison, including their leader. The ones who are left, they want revenge. Want me back in the game running their operations. If I refuse, they destroy everything I care about." His gray eyes met hers, carrying terrible certainty. "They just found out I have a son. And now they think I have you. 2 weapons to use against me." Maria's voice came out hollow. "I poured your coffee once. That's literally all that happened. Doesn't matter what's true. Matters what they believe. And they believe you're important to me because you found Connor, because you called me, because you came to the hospital. In their world, that makes you mine to protect." Maria laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that had nothing to do with humor. "I'm not yours. I'm not anyone's. I'm a waitress who made a phone call." Jack stepped closer, his voice urgent but not threatening. "I know that. You know that. But they don't care about facts. They care about leverage. And right now, you're leverage." Maria looked at the brick with its spray-painted threat, at Ruby's disappointed face, at the shattered remains of her safe, normal life. She thought about her apartment, about $40 short on rent, about the double shift tomorrow, that she wasn't sure she'd survive to work. She thought about Connor's blue lips and Jax's question to her. "How long have you known him?" She thought about being alone when you needed not to be. "What happens now?" Jax's expression shifted, relief and regret mixing into something complicated. "Now I protect you, both of you, Connor and you, but you have to let me. You have to trust me enough to let me keep you safe while we figure out how to end this." "How do we end it?" "I don't know yet, but I know running doesn't work, hiding doesn't work. Eventually they find you. Eventually they—" He stopped himself, jaw clenching, on whatever he'd been about to say. Maria finished the thought for him. "Eventually they kill you and everyone around you." Jax nodded slowly. Maria wrapped her arms around herself, feeling cold despite the morning sun streaming through the boarded window. She looked at this man she'd known for less than 12 hours, this stranger with a son he'd just discovered, and enemies who use violence as language. She looked at the wreckage of her diner, at Ruby's worried face, at the normal life she'd spent 28 years building from nothing. One condition: you tell me everything. No more secrets, no more surprises. If I'm in this, I'm in it, knowing exactly what I'm facing. Jax met her eyes, something like respect flickering across his face. Deal. Maria untied her apron with shaking hands, folded it carefully, and set it on the nearest table. She walked to Ruby, who was still behind the counter, still watching with eyes that had seen this scene play out in 100 different ways over 23 years. I need 3 days to sort this out. Ruby's expression was sad but understanding. Unpaid. And Maria, be careful. Men like that, they burn everything they touch. Maria nodded, not trusting her voice. She walked back to where Jax waited by the door, where morning sunlight painted the broken glass in colors too beautiful for something so dangerous. Where are we going? Somewhere safe, somewhere they won't look, somewhere I can explain everything without worrying about bricks or bullets. Maria took one last look at the diner that had been her sanctuary for 3 years, at the routine that had kept her alive and invisible and safe. She thought about the phone call she'd made 12 hours ago, about the choice that had seemed so simple in a dark alley with a dying boy. Okay, let's go. They walked out together into November sunlight that felt like judgment, Maria's decision made and irreversible. Behind them, Ruby watched through the boarded window, and in the parking lot, a black SUV that had been waiting 3 blocks away pulled out and began following at a careful distance. The Vipers knew where Maria worked. Now they knew she'd left with Jax. The message had been received. The response had been noted. And somewhere in the desert between Arizona and Nevada, men were making plans for what came next, for how to use a waitress and a teenage boy to destroy the man who'd destroyed them first. Maria Santos had made a phone call. Now she was at war. The Starlight Motel squatted on the edge of nowhere 20 miles past the last gas station, its neon sign flickering with 2 dead letters that made it read Sanerlight. Jax's motorcycle growled to a stop in front of room 14, and Maria climbed off the back seat with legs that didn't quite remember how to hold her weight. The ride had taken 40 minutes. Her arms wrapped around a man she barely knew. Her face pressed against leather that smelled like gasoline and old smoke, the desert wind stripping away her certainty with every mile they traveled from civilization. Hawk's pickup truck pulled in beside them, the bed loaded with supplies Maria couldn't identify in the morning glare. The man who emerged looked like time itself had carved him from weathered stone, 62 years etched into every line of his face, silver hair pulled back in a ponytail that reached his shoulders, eyes the color of faded denim that had seen too much and forgotten nothing. He moved with the careful precision of someone whose body had absorbed decades of punishment and learned to compensate. This is safe. Maria's voice sounded too loud in the desert silence, her question hanging in air so dry it hurt to breathe. Hawk's gaze swept the parking lot, the highway, the scrub brush, stretching toward mountains that looked painted onto the horizon. Safe as anywhere gets right now. Owner owes me 3 favors. This is 2 of them. Jax unlocked the motel room door, revealing space that managed to be both generic and depressing. 2 double beds with comforters showing stains that predated Maria's birthwood paneling from the 70s carpet that had given up trying to remember what color it used to be. But the door had a deadbolt and a chain. The windows had curtains thick enough to block light, and the bathroom had running water that came out rust-colored for the first 30 seconds before clearing. Maria sat on the bed closest to the door because it felt like maintaining some illusion of escape. Jack stood by the window, one hand holding the curtain open, just enough to watch the parking lot. Hawk settled into the chair by the table, pulling a gun from his waistband and setting it within easy reach with movements so casual they were clearly automatic. Start talking. You promised me everything. Maria's words came out harder than intended, fear manifesting as aggression, again the only defense mechanism she'd ever mastered. Jax let the curtain fall and turned to face her, his expression carrying weight that made him look older than 48. Iron Brotherhood started as therapy, group of Marines coming back from Afghanistan, dealing with what we'd seen, what we'd done. My brother Jack organized it. Just guys with bikes trying to find purpose after service, trying to be something other than broken. His voice carried the particular flatness of someone reciting facts to avoid feeling them. Jack believed in the club being positive. Community outreach, veteran support fundraisers for families who lost soldiers. We wore the leather, rode the bikes, looked tough enough that people left us alone, but the core was good, noble even. Hawk picked up the thread, his weathered voice adding texture. Worked for 5 years. Then we started getting younger members. Kids who wanted the brotherhood without having earned it through service. Diego Reyes, his brother Carlos, Finn O'Brien, couple others. They saw the club as cover for business opportunities. The way Hawk said business opportunities made it clear what kind of business he meant. Maria's stomach tightened, pieces of the story arranging themselves into a picture she'd suspected but hadn't wanted to confirm. Jack refused, said we'd built something that mattered, something that helped people instead of hurting them. Diego and Carlos pushed back, said we were wasting potential. Said the connections we had through military networks could move product across state lines without anyone looking twice. Jax's hands curled into fists, knuckles going white. They killed him, made it look like brake failure on Highway 9. Jack's bike went off a cliff during a night ride, burned on impact. Sheriff ruled it accidental. Maria watched his face, saw grief that had turned to stone, but never stopped existing underneath. You didn't believe it. Jack maintained his bike like some men maintain their marriages, obsessively, perfectly checking every bolt and cable twice. His brakes didn't fail. Someone cut the line just enough that pressure would finish the job. Hawk's weathered face showed agreement. I testified with him. We both went to the FBI with what we knew. Took 9 months to build the case. They raided the clubhouse, arrested 6 Vipers, including Carlos. Evidence was solid: trafficking, conspiracy, weapons charges, enough to put them away for 15 to 20. But Diego wasn't caught. The statement came from Maria, understanding dawning with cold certainty. Jax nodded slowly. He'd been smart. Let Carlos be the public face while Diego stayed clean. Managed logistics, never touched product directly. FBI couldn't make charges stick. He walked while his brother went to prison. And now he wants revenge. More than revenge. He wants me. My reputation, my contacts, my experience. With me running operations, Diego thinks he can build an empire. Without me, he's just another small-time operator trying to play big. Maria stood pacing the narrow space between beds, her mind racing through implications. So beating Connor was a message. The brick through the diner window was escalation. What comes next? Neither man answered immediately, which was answer enough. Maria's voice rose, frustration bleeding through exhaustion. What comes next? Jax's gray eyes met hers with terrible honesty. They take someone. Connor, you, anyone I care about. They hurt them until I agree to join, or they kill them to prove they're serious. Then we go to the police. FBI, someone. Hawk's laugh was bitter, devoid of humor. Diego's got Sheriff Marcus Kane on payroll. Half the local cops look the other way. FBI would need months to build a new case, and we don't have months. Maria's phone buzzed in her pocket, making everyone tense. She pulled it out, stared at the screen, her face going pale. It's the hospital. Connor's asking for me. County General looked different in daylight, less desperate, more bureaucratic. The emergency room chaos replaced by scheduled procedures and visiting hours. Maria walked through corridors that smelled like antiseptic and artificial air, freshening Jax beside her, Hawk, trailing at a distance that suggested security rather than companionship. They'd argued about this for 20 minutes at the motel, Jax insisting it was too dangerous, Maria countering that if Connor was asking for her, she owed him the decency of showing up. Connor Brennan occupied a private room on the 3rd floor, the kind hospitals reserved for patients who needed monitoring but weren't critical. He looked impossibly young, propped against pillows, dark hair sticking up in directions that suggested restless sleep, bruises on his face, turning from purple to yellow-green in the natural healing progression. His eyes, the same dark brown Maria remembered from the alley, tracked them as they entered, sharp, with intelligence that seemed too old for 17. You came. Relief colored his voice, making Maria's chest tighten with emotions she couldn't name. She moved to the chair beside his bed, hyper-aware of Jack standing by the door, the distance between father and son that was both physical and metaphorical. Of course. How are you feeling? Like I got beat up and left to die in an alley. The dark humor landed flat Connor's attempt at levity cracking around the edges. His eyes moved past Maria to Jack's expression, shifting into something harder. So you're really him, my dad. The word carried weight that Jax visibly felt his shoulders tensing like he'd taken a physical blow. He approached the bed, slowly, movements careful as someone navigating a minefield. Connor, Mom died 3 months ago, lung cancer, stage 4 by the time they caught it. She was gone in 6 weeks. Connor's voice had gone flat, reciting facts as defense against feeling them. Maria recognized the technique. She'd used it herself in caseworkers' offices, describing abuse and neglect like reading a grocery list because showing emotion meant giving them power over you. She never told me about you. Just said my dad wasn't around, wasn't interested, couldn't be part of my life. I thought you were some deadbeat who'd abandoned us. Jax's face could have been carved from the same stone as Hawk's, but his eyes betrayed everything. His expression tried to hide guilt, grief, desperate need to explain. I didn't know. Your mother and we were together maybe 3 months, 17 years ago, before I met my wife, Sarah. Kate left suddenly, no explanation, no forwarding address. I tried to find her. Try harder. The words cut like surgical instruments, precise and devastating. Connor's jaw clenched, teenager fury mixing with adult pain. She worked 3 jobs to keep us fed. Clinic during the day, cleaning offices at night, weekend shifts at a pharmacy. I wore secondhand clothes and ate school lunch because it was free. She died without health insurance because she couldn't afford it. Each sentence landed like an accusation. Jax took it, absorbing every blow without deflecting or defending. Meanwhile, you were here riding motorcycles, playing outlaw, living whatever life brotherhood meant. Did you think about her, wonder where she went? Or did you just move on to the next thing? Maria watched Jax's face, saw something crack behind the armor he wore. His voice came out rough, scraped, raw. I thought about her every day for a year. Then Sarah came along and I convinced myself Kate had her reasons for leaving, that she'd made her choice and I needed to respect it. I met Sarah, fell in love, built a life. Sarah died 4 years ago, motorcycle accident. He paused, the irony not lost on anyone. I've been alone since, running what's left of the brotherhood, trying to keep it clean, trying to honor what Jack wanted. I thought that was my legacy, a club that helped instead of hurt. Connor's expression flickered, anger giving way to something more complex. Then those men at the bus depot asked if I was Ryder's kid, said my dad was famous, said he destroyed their families. They beat me for hours, kept asking where you were, what you were planning. I didn't know anything, so they just kept. His voice broke, 17-year-old facade crumbling to reveal traumatized child underneath. Maria's hand moved automatically, covering his, offering silent support. Connor squeezed hard enough to hurt, anchoring himself to something real. They said you're a rat, a traitor who betrayed his brothers. They said you destroyed families, put good men in prison. Is that true? The question hung in sterile air between them, father and son, connected by blood and separated by 17 years of absence and lies. Jax could have deflected, could have explained the nuance, could have defended his choices with logic and context. Instead, he told the truth. Yes, I testified against men I'd called brothers, put them in prison, destroyed their families in the process. Connor's face hardened, disappointment settling into his features like it had always been waiting there. Then maybe Mom was right keeping me away. Maybe you are exactly what they said. Jax absorbed the words like bullets, each one finding target, none of them fatal, but all of them wounding. He nodded slowly, turned toward the door, and Maria saw him leaving. Not just the room, but something bigger, surrendering to the verdict his son had rendered. Wait, her voice stopped him mid-step. Maria looked at Connor, at his bruised face and defiant eyes, at the fear bleeding through his anger. Why did they testify? Ask him why. Connor's jaw worked stubbornly, but curiosity won over pride. Fine. Why? Jax turned back, his expression showing exhaustion that went deeper than lack of sleep. Because they killed my brother. Because they wanted to turn something good into something that destroyed lives. Because I'd rather be called a rat than let them traffic drugs through communities that were already broken. His voice gained strength, certainty replacing defense. because being loyal to evil men doesn't make you honorable. It makes you complicit. And I chose to be something other than complicit. Connor was quiet processing. Maria released his hand and stood moving between father and son like a mediator in a conflict neither of them knew how to resolve. Your mom kept you away because she thought this life would hurt you. She was probably right. But you're here now hurt anyway, and your dad's trying to keep you alive. Maybe that matters more than what happened 17 years ago. Before anyone could respond, the door opened. Officer Chen entered, his expression grim, carrying the weight of bad news that couldn't be delayed. We have a problem. Hospital security reported a breach. Someone accessed Connor's records from an outside terminal. They know he's here. What room discharge schedule? Jax was already moving, his command voice cutting through the room. When's discharge? Tomorrow morning officially. We're leaving now. Unofficial discharge. Hawk, bring the truck to service entrance. Chen, can you clear a path? The officer hesitated, bureaucracy warring with pragmatism. I can give you 10 minutes. After that, I have to file a report. 10 minutes is enough. They moved Connor and 8. Hawk appeared with a wheelchair, ignoring the boys' protests that he could walk. Chen ran interference with nurses, his badge buying them the time they needed to slip out through corridors meant for laundry and food service. Maria followed, her heart hammering against her ribs, every shadow. Looking like threat, every sound potentially hostile. The truck was waiting, engine running, Hawk behind the wheel with that careful stillness of someone ready for violence. They loaded Connor into the back seat, Maria sliding in beside him, Jax in front. Hawk pulled out smoothly, no rush, nothing to attract attention. 3 blocks from the hospital, a black SUV pulled into traffic behind them. We've got company. Hawk's voice was calm, stating fact rather than expressing concern. Maria twisted in her seat, watching the SUV match their speed, maintain consistent distance, not trying to hide, wanting them to know they were being followed. The clubhouse, original one before the raid. Jax's words were instruction. Hawk nodded, changing course, heading away from town toward desert roads that slowly surrendered pavement for dirt. The SUV followed, patient as death, letting them run because it knew where they were going, because Diego had probably guessed their destination before they had. The condemned Iron Brotherhood clubhouse sat like a monument to failure, its cinder-block walls tagged with graffiti, its windows broken, its parking lot cracked and sprouting weeds through asphalt. But the structure was solid, defensible, isolated enough that gunfire wouldn't attract immediate attention. Hawk parked behind the building, positioning the truck for quick escape. They moved Connor inside, Maria helping support his weight despite his protests. Jax clearing rooms with efficiency that suggested military training never forgotten. 3 other men waited inside, ghost thin and pale, with hands constantly moving, the kind of nervous energy that suggested intelligence running too fast for comfort. Thin, broad-shouldered, and guilty-looking mechanics, tattoos covering forearms thick as fence posts. Marcus, older, quiet, watching everything with predator's patience. They stood when Jax entered Brotherhood, greeting without needing words. Diego knows we're here. Jax's statement was met with nods. Ghost spoke first, his voice higher than expected from someone who looked half dead. Been tracking their communications. They've got 8 men mobilized. Sheriff Kane's running interference, keeping police off their backs. How long before they move? Already moving. Convoy left their safe house 6 minutes ago. We've got maybe 20 minutes. Connor sat on a folding chair, his face pale, pain breaking through whatever medication the hospital had given him. Maria crouched beside him, her hand finding his again, offering the only thing she could presence, proof he wasn't alone. What's the play? Finn's question directed at Jax, deferring to leadership even in this broken place. Jax moved to the broken window, scanning the desert through gaps in boarded sections. We hold until dark, use the time to plan actual strategy instead of reacting. Diego wants me scared, wants me desperate. We don't give him that. Maria's voice cut through their planning. What does he actually want? What's the end game? Every man turned to look at her, this waitress who'd stumbled into their world, this outsider, asking questions they'd avoided. Jax's expression showed something like respect. He wants me running his trafficking operation, wants my military contacts, my reputation, my experience. With me, he's legitimate in ways that matter to buyers and distributors. Without me, he's just another thug trying to break into markets that don't want him. So give him what he wants. The suggestion made everyone freeze. Connor's head snapped toward her betrayal, flashing across his bruised face. Maria met his eyes, then Jax's, her voice steady despite their reactions. Not really, but make him think you will. Buy time to build a real strategy instead of hiding in condemned buildings, waiting for attack. Hawk's weathered face showed consideration. Jax's showed conflict. Before either could respond, Connor pushed to his feet, his voice shaking with more than physical pain. You join them after everything you just said about testifying, about choosing not to be complicit. Jax's attention focused completely on his son, the rest of the room fading. I'd do anything to keep you alive. Even become the thing Mom protected me from. Even prove her right about who you are. The question landed like a grenade, exploding everything Jax had been building toward redemption. His face showed the impact, showed a man caught between protecting his son's life and protecting his soul. I don't know. The honesty was brutal. Connor's expression crumbled, his voice barely above whisper. She told me stories about you before she got too sick to talk. Said you were good, once honorable, believed in protecting people. Said the brotherhood corrupted, that turned something beautiful into something ugly. She never blamed you, just mourned what you could have been. Connor's eyes filled with tears. He was too exhausted to contain. If you joined Diego, she was right. Everything she believed about you was a lie. And I'll have lost my mother and never had a father worth having. The words hung in stale air, accusation and plea combined. Jax looked like he'd aged a decade in 30 seconds. Maria watched him wrestle with impossible choices, with the kind of moral calculus that had no right answers. The first gunshot shattered the window beside Ghost's head. Everyone dropped combat instincts, overriding thought bodies, seeking cover before conscious minds registered danger. Return fire came immediately. Hawk from behind overturned desk. Ghost scrambling toward back entrance. Finn already moving with weapon drawn. Diego's voice boomed from outside, amplified by bullhorn carrying across the desert silence. You've got 10 seconds to send out the waitress and the boy. After that, we come in shooting. Maria's blood turned to ice. Beside her, Connor was shaking, his earlier defiance replaced by terror that came from knowing exactly what these men were capable of because he'd already survived their methods once. Jax moved with purpose that suggested decision made his gray eyes finding Maria. Back door. Ghost will cover you. Get Connor to Hawk's truck. Keys are in the ignition. What about you? I'll buy you time. Go. Now. Maria wanted to argue, to protest that splitting up was exactly what Diego wanted, that sacrifice was noble but stupid. But Connor's hand was in hers, his pulse racing beneath her fingers, his breath coming too fast for someone who'd been beaten and hospitalized 12 hours ago. She pulled him toward the back entrance where Ghost waited, his pale face grim. 5 seconds. Diego's voice again counting down to violence with the patience of someone who'd won before the game started. Ghost cracked the back door, scanning the area through fraction of opening. 3 trucks, at least 10 men, covering all approaches. Then we go through them. Maria's words surprised everyone, including herself. Connor stared at her like she'd lost her mind. Ghost's expression showed interest. Explain. They're expecting us to sneak, to hide, to run scared. We go straight at them, fast and loud, make them choose between stopping us or maintaining position. Hawk materialized from somewhere, his weathered face showing approval. Distraction, oldest trick in warfare. Maria met Jax's eyes across the room, saw him calculating odds, assessing risk, measuring her determination against his protective instincts. Whatever he saw made him nod slowly. Ghost, you drive. Finn, cover the truck. Hawk and Marcus create crossfire from windows. I'll negotiate with Diego, keep him talking while you move. 2 seconds. The countdown finished. Jax raised his voice, projecting through broken windows. Diego, let's talk, man to man, no guns. Laughter answered him, cruel and certain. You don't make demands. You're surrounded, outgunned, and out of time. Send out the waitress and kid or we burn you out. The kid's my son. Silence. Then Diego's voice again, carrying new edge of satisfaction. Is that right, Catherine Brennan's boy? The one you didn't know existed? That's beautiful, Jax. That's poetry. You testified against family. Now family gets to pay the price. Maria pulled Connor toward Ghost's position by the back door, Finn moving ahead of them, with weapon drawn covering their approach. Through the gap, she could see the clearing behind the building, the scraggly desert brush, the dirt road leading away. She could also see two men positioned 30 yards out, rifles ready, watching for exactly this escape attempt. Ghost whispered instructions. On three. Straight line to truck. Don't stop, don't look back. If you hear shooting, get lower, but keep moving. Connor's hand trembled in Maria's grip. She squeezed hard, anchoring both of them. We're going to make it. How do you know? Because your dad's buying us time. Because Ghost and Finn aren't risking their lives. Because we don't get to quit. Front windows exploded with coordinated gunfire, Hawk and Marcus creating the promised crossfire, forcing Diego's men to take cover, disrupting their positions. Ghost yanked the back door open fully. Three. They ran. Maria had Connor's arm across her shoulders, taking his weight, pushing forward through pain and fear. Ghost led Finn, guarded their flank bullets, kicking up dust in trajectories that missed by inches or feet, but felt like they passed through center mass. One of Diego's men stood from cover, rifle swinging toward them, and Finn's return shot dropped him before he could fire. 20 yards. 15. The truck growing larger, becoming possible instead of theoretical. Maria could see the keys dangling from ignition, could picture herself behind the wheel, could imagine escape transforming from desperate hope to reality. 10 yards. The second shooter appeared from behind the truck itself, weapon raised, no time to dodge or duck or do anything except accept that she'd made her play and lost. Connor yanked her sideways, throwing them both toward the ground, the bullet passing through space they'd occupied. Ghost's return fire was immediate, 3 shots in rapid succession, the shooter going down hard. Maria scrambled up, hauling Connor with her, both of them diving into the truck's back seat while Ghost took the wheel. Engine roared to life. Finn jumped in beside them, his weapon still raised toward threats manifesting from multiple directions. The truck lurched forward, tires spinning in desert dirt before finding purchase. Behind them, the clubhouse erupted with intensified gunfire. Diego's men concentrating fire on the building, on Jax and Hawk and Marcus, still inside, pouring bullets through broken windows with intent to kill rather than intimidate. Maria twisted in her seat, watching the condemned clubhouse shrink with distance, knowing Jax was still inside, still buying them time with his life. He'll be okay. Connor's question was directed at Ghost, desperate for reassurance from someone who might actually know. Ghost's pale face showed nothing, his hands steady on the wheel. Your father survived worse. Hawk, too. They'll extract when Diego realizes you're gone, use the chaos to disappear. How do you know? Because that's what Marines do. They complete the mission. They reached paved highway, Ghost pushing the truck faster distance, becoming their ally. Maria checked her phone, no signal out here, no way to confirm anyone's status. Connor sat pressed against her side, his breathing ragged, pain and fear and exhaustion combining into something that looked like shock. She wrapped an arm around his shoulders, offering warmth and presence, the only thing she had to give. Thank you. Connor's voice was small, young, stripped of the defiance he'd wielded like armor in the hospital. For what? For not leaving when you could have. For staying with me. Maria thought about the phone call she'd made in a dark alley, about the series of choices that had led from there to here, about how quickly a normal life could dissolve when you chose to help instead of walk away. We're in this together now. You, me, your dad. Whatever happens next, we face it as... She couldn't finish the thought because family felt presumptuous and team felt insufficient. Connor finished for her, his voice carrying weight beyond his years. As people who give a damn. 20 minutes down the highway, Ghost's phone finally got signal. It rang twice before someone answered. Ghost listened, his expression unchanging, before handing the phone to Maria. For you. Jax's voice came through, rough but alive, carrying a background sounds of engines in motion. You made it. Relief flooded through Maria so intensely it felt like physical pain. So did you. Where are you? Hawk's bike, heading to Father Mike's chapel in Clearwater. Old friend's safe haven place to regroup. What about Diego? He's got a new message for me, delivered by bullet through the clubhouse wall. 24 hours. Either I join him, run his trafficking operation, or he kills Connor. Then you, then everyone who's helped me. Maria's hand tightened on the phone, Connor listening to half the conversation and understanding all of it. What are you going to do? The pause before Jax answered carried weight of mountains of impossible choices of father who just discovered his son and father willing to destroy himself to keep that son alive. Whatever it takes, even if it destroys everything I am. The line went dead. Maria stared at the phone, feeling the trap closing around all of them. Diego's ultimatum, Jax's desperation, Connor's trauma, her own complicity in a war she hadn't chosen but couldn't abandon. Outside the truck windows, desert stretched endlessly, beautiful and indifferent, offering no answers to questions that had none. My dad's going to sacrifice himself for me. Connor's statement wasn't question, just terrible certainty. Maria looked at this 17-year-old boy who'd lost his mother 3 months ago, learned about his father yesterday, survived torture and betrayal and violence that would mark him forever. She thought about what he'd said in the hospital about Jax proving his mother right or wrong, about legacy being defined by choices made under pressure. Maybe, or maybe we find another way. What other way? Diego's got us trapped. Join him and betray everything, or refuse and watch everyone die. There's always another way. We just have to be smart enough to find it. Connor's expression showed skepticism born from experience, from watching his mother die because they couldn't afford treatment, from learning that the world didn't care about fairness or justice or right. But underneath the skepticism, Maria saw something else, desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, she was right. Ghost drove in silence, following highway toward Clearwater, toward Father Mike's chapel, toward whatever came next. Behind them, Diego's men regrouped and planned. Ahead, Jax rode with Huck, wrestling with choices that all led to destruction of different kinds. And in the truck, Maria held Connor's hand and wondered what the hell they were doing, how waitresses and teenage boys and broken bikers were supposed to fight criminal organizations with resources and ruthlessness and no regard for collateral damage. But she'd made the phone call. She'd chosen to help. And Maria Santos had learned in 28 years of surviving that the only way through hell was straight ahead, one step at a time, holding tight to whatever mattered and refusing to let go, even when letting go would be so much easier. So she held Connor's hand and didn't let go, even when her fingers went numb and her arm ached and the desert stretched endlessly in all directions, without offering hope or salvation or anything except the next mile and the one after that. Father Mike's chapel in Clearwater existed in the space between sanctuary and ruin, its adobe walls cracked from decades of desert sun, its wooden cross tilted 3 degrees off true vertical, like the whole building was slowly surrendering to gravity. The priest who emerged to greet them looked nothing like the cassocked figures Maria remembered from mandatory foster care church visits. Father Mike wore jeans and a flannel shirt, his gray beard nearly as wild as Hawk's ponytail arms, sleeved in fading tattoos that told stories of a life before salvation. Jax Ryder, been a while. The two men embraced with the familiarity of soldiers who'd survived the same war, Father Mike's weathered hands gripping Jax's shoulders hard enough to leave marks. His eyes moved past to Connor, then Maria, assessment happening in seconds. This is the boy, and the woman who started it all. Maria bristled at the phrasing, at being reduced to catalyst rather than participant, but Father Mike's smile carried warmth that diffused her defensiveness. Maria Santos, your Uncle Ramon sends his regards. The floor tilted beneath Maria's feet. She hadn't seen Ramon in 14 years, not since he'd left Arizona for missionary work in Central America, hadn't even known Father Mike and her distant uncle were connected. Ramon's your cousin. We rode together before I found God, and he found purpose elsewhere. Small world, smaller when you live on the margins. The chapel's interior smelled like incense and old wood prayer candles flickering in alcoves despite the afternoon light streaming through stained glass windows, depicting saints Maria couldn't name. Father Mike led them to a back room that served as office and living quarters space, dominated by a desk covered in papers and a cot that looked older than Maria. FBI's coming, Agent Sarah Chen. She's been building a case against Diego for 18 months, needs one piece to make it stick, recorded. Admission of recruitment for trafficking operations. Jack stood by the window, his body language radiating tension that hadn't dissipated since they'd fled the clubhouse. Connor sat in the room's single chair, his bruised face showing exhaustion that medicine couldn't touch. Maria leaned against the wall, hyper-aware that she was the only person in this room without history connecting them to everyone else. A wire? You want me to wear a wire? Father Mike nodded, pulling a laptop from his desk and opening files that showed surveillance photos, recorded conversations. Evidence of an investigation far more comprehensive than Maria had imagined possible. Chen's been working this since Diego walked on the original charges. She's got financial records, witness statements, intercepted communications. Everything except Diego explicitly recruiting someone for trafficking. That's the RICO predicate she needs. Hawk materialized from somewhere, his presence so quiet Maria hadn't noticed him arrive. He studied the laptop screen, his faded denim eyes scanning data with practiced efficiency. Risk assessment. High. Diego's paranoid runs counter-surveillance sweeps for wires. If he finds it, Jax dies. Probably Connor and Maria too sent a message about what happens to rats. Connor flinched at the word, at the reminder that his father's reputation was built on exactly this, betraying brothers for law enforcement, choosing justice over loyalty. Jax noticed his gray eyes finding his son's, holding contact until Connor looked away first. Tonight, Chen's mobilizing teams in 3 states, one shot to get this right. The door opened without knocking. A woman entered carrying authority like a weapon, Asian, maybe 40, wearing tactical pants and a windbreaker that failed to completely conceal her sidearm. FBI credentials hung from her neck on a lanyard, Agent Sarah Chen printed in block letters below her photo. Her eyes swept the room with law enforcement's particular wariness, cataloging faces and threat levels before settling on Jax. "Mr. Ryder, we finally meet officially." Her voice carried Texas drawl softened by years of federal training. She pulled a small device from her pocket, no larger than a button, holding it up for everyone to see. "Latest generation, transmits to relay van within half-mile radius. Battery life 4 hours. Adhesive backing attaches to skin under clothing. Waterproof, impact resistant, designed to survive pat-downs." She set the wire on Father Mike's desk like a communion wafer, this tiny piece of technology that would either save them or kill them. "Diego will sweep you. He's smart, thorough, trusts no one. The wire needs to be placed where casual pat-downs won't find it, but where it'll still pick up conversation clearly." Jax's jaw worked, internal calculation visible on his face. Placement suggestions. Small of back below belt line, between shoulder blades, inside thigh, anywhere that requires undressing to check properly somewhere. Diego won't go unless he's already decided you're wired. The clinical discussion of where to hide surveillance equipment felt surreal to Maria, like they were planning a heist rather than trying to survive. Connor's hands gripped the chair arms hard enough that his knuckles went white, his breathing shallow. "What do I say? How do I get him to admit trafficking recruitment without being obvious?" Chen pulled up a document on Father Mike's laptop, bullet points outlining conversation strategies that read like manipulation manual. "Let him pitch you, act reluctant but persuadable. Ask about logistics, profit margins, security. The more details he gives, the stronger the case. But most important, get him to explicitly state he wants you running trafficking operations and threaten what happens if you refuse. Because threats establish coercion, and coercion makes it RICO conspiracy instead of just solicitation." Chen's eyebrow raised slightly at Jax's understanding. He shrugged, expression bitter. "I testified before. I know how federal cases work." "Then you know we need clean audio. No ambiguity, no room for defense attorneys to claim he was joking or speaking hypothetically. Diego needs to believe you're actually considering his offer long enough to talk specifics." Maria found her voice the question that had been building since Chen walked in. "What happens to Connor and me during this?" "You stay with Father Mike, protected location agents on perimeter. If anything goes wrong, evacuation protocol gets you to federal facility within 20 minutes. And if Diego decides to move against us while Jax is at the meeting," Chen's expression showed respect for the question, for Maria's refusal to pretend danger didn't exist. "Then we abort, raid Diego's location immediately with what we have, and pray it's enough to make charges stick. But honestly, if we abort, Diego walks. Again. And you spend the rest of your lives looking over your shoulders." And the silence that followed carried weight of futures branching from this moment, safety purchased with continued danger versus risk traded for potential freedom. Connor stood abruptly, his voice cutting through the stillness. "Can I talk to my dad alone?" Everyone looked at Jax, who nodded slowly. Chen Hawk and Father Mike filed out, Maria following last, catching Connor's eyes as she passed. He looked terrified and determined in equal measure, 17 years old, and carrying burdens that would break most adults. The door closed. Maria sat on the chapel's front steps, afternoon sun warm on her face, desert wind carrying scents of sage and dust. She could hear voices from inside Connor and Jack's, words too muffled to distinguish but tone clear enough. Anger, then pleading, then something that might have been tears from one or both. 20 minutes passed. The door opened. Connor emerged first, his face blotchy, but expression lighter, like some weight had been lifted or redistributed. Jax followed, his gray eyes red-rimmed but clear, carrying peace that hadn't been there before. "We're good." Connor's statement was directed at Maria, at Chen and Hawk and Father Mike, who'd all reappeared from wherever they'd given father and son privacy. No one asked what had been said, what understanding had been reached in that room. Some conversations were sacred, their contents meant only for participants. Chen approached Jax with the wire adhesive backing exposed, waiting for permission. He nodded, turning his back, lifting his shirt to expose scarred skin and old tattoos. The agent placed the device with practiced efficiency, pressing firmly to ensure contact, testing audio levels through equipment in her vehicle parked behind the chapel. "Signal's clean. Remember, let him talk. The more he says, the better." And Jax, she met his eyes with intensity that made clear this wasn't agent to informant, but human to human. "If it goes sideways, you get out. We'll find another way." "There is no other way. Diego wins or we do. Tonight decides which." Sunset painted the desert in colors that hurt to look at, oranges and purples, so saturated they seemed artificial light playing across rock formations, like nature was showing off. The truck stop Diego had chosen sat 20 miles from anywhere that mattered, isolated enough that screams wouldn't carry, but public enough that outright assassination would attract attention. Jax arrived on Hawk's bike, the growl of its engine announcing their presence before headlights swept across the parking lot. Diego waited beside a black SUV, 4 men flanking him with the casual readiness of people accustomed to violence. He looked nothing like Maria had imagined, average height, average build, the kind of forgettable appearance that helped criminals blend into crowds. But his eyes ruined the disguise, dark and flat as a shark's, showing calculation without conscience. Jack's rider, the legend himself. Diego's voice carried across the distance between them, mocking and satisfied predator who'd cornered prey after long pursuit. Jax dismounted Hawk, staying with the bike, positioning himself for quick extraction if needed. 300 yards away, hidden in scrub brush, Maria crouched beside Connor and Chen, watching through binoculars, the FBI's recording equipment capturing every word the wire transmitted. "Diego, been a while. 5 years, since you destroyed my brother's life, put him in cage, tore apart everything we'd built." Jax's hand stayed visible, body language open despite the tension radiating from every line of his frame. "Your brother chose his path, I chose mine. And now your path leads here. To me. To choice you should have made years ago." Diego circled slowly, predatory assessment, his men maintaining positions that triangulated Jax and Hawk without being overtly threatening. The dance was familiar to everyone involved, criminals and lawmen, playing roles perfected through repetition, each knowing the other's moves before they happened. "You know what I'm offering. I've been patient, more patient than Carlos would have been. I gave you time to grieve your wife, time to realize the club you're protecting is already dead. Now I'm offering resurrection." Jax's voice carried careful neutrality, not accepting, but not refusing. "In exchange for what? Your experience, your contacts, your reputation. You run our distribution network, military bases, veteran communities, places we can't access without someone they trust. You move product, we handle logistics and security. Clean, professional, profitable." Through the binoculars, Maria watched Jax's face, saw him forcing himself to consider the offer seriously enough that Diego would believe his interest. "What's the scale? 20 million annually. With your network, could double that inside 2 years. Chen's hand tightened on her recording equipment, confirmation that they were getting usable audio. Beside Maria, Connor trembled, watching his father negotiate with the man who'd ordered his torture, listening to discussions of drug trafficking like it was legitimate business proposal. "And if I refuse?" Diego's smile was terrible, showing teeth without warmth. "Then I hurt you in ways that never heal. I start with Connor, your son, the boy you just discovered. I take him, make him suffer, make you watch. Then the waitress, because she matters to you whether you admit it or not. Then Hawk Ghost, every brother still loyal to you. I burn what's left of Iron Brotherhood until there's nothing but ash and memory. Jack stood perfectly still, letting the threats register, letting Diego believe they were working. Maria could see the calculation in his gray eyes, the careful performance of man pretending to break. My son needs to be safe, needs college money, future life without looking over his shoulder. I'm offering exactly that. Protection, prosperity, peace. All you have to do is what you're good at, leading men, building networks, making things work. The product we move, it's going to move regardless. At least with you involved, it's professional, clean, minimal collateral damage. The rationalization was practiced, smoothed the kind of moral justification that let criminals sleep at night. Jax let silence stretch performance of consideration of man, weighing impossible choices. 24 hours. I need time to think, to talk to Connor, to figure out logistics. Diego's expression hardened satisfaction, giving way to suspicion. You've had 5 years to think. You get 12 hours. Call me by midnight, give me your answer, or I start with the waitress. She's easiest to reach, least protected. I'll make sure you hear her scream before she stops. The casual brutality of the threat made Maria's stomach turn. Connor grabbed her hand, his pulse racing beneath her fingers. Chen spoke into radio, low and urgent, coordinating teams for immediate action if Diego decided to move against them tonight. Jax held to Diego's gaze, something shifting in his expression. Grief, resignation, acceptance of terrible necessity. When he spoke, his voice carried weight that made everyone listening understand this was the moment everything changed. I choose my son. I choose my family. I choose being the man my son can be proud of. Diego's face twisted, satisfaction becoming rage. Then you chose death. His, hers, yours. Should have taken the deal while, no. Jax's interruption was quiet but absolute. I chose justice. The FBI vehicles appeared from 4 directions, simultaneously, lights, blazing sirens, screaming tactical teams moving with precision that came from months of planning. Diego's men reached for weapons but found themselves already targeted. Red laser dots painting their chests, voices shouting commands that weren't negotiable. Diego himself froze, understanding, flooding his face, betrayal and fury mixing into expression of pure hatred directed at Jax. You wore a wire again. You're still the same rat, still destroying brotherhood. Jax watched agents swarm Diego's position, watched the man who'd terrorized his son get forced to the ground and cuffed, watched the careful plan execute exactly as choreographed. I didn't destroy brotherhood. I saved what it was supposed to mean. Chen was running toward Jax, other agents securing the scene, coordinated raids happening simultaneously in Nevada and California, according to radio chatter flooding the frequency. Maria pulled Connor to his feet, both of them emerging from hiding, approaching the truck, stopped parking lot that had transformed into crime scene, complete with evidence markers and official vehicles. Diego screamed from the ground, agents holding him down, his voice carrying across distance. You'll never be free of this. I've got friends, resources, reach you can't imagine. This isn't over. But his words rang hollow, desperation masquerading as threat. Chen pulled evidence bag from her vehicle, holding it up for Diego to see, the wire still transmitting, still recording his final outburst. Around them, 17 Vipers were being arrested, weapons and drugs seized from vehicles. The entire conspiracy collapsing under weight of 18 months investigation, plus tonight's recorded admissions. Connor reached Jax and threw himself at his father with force that would have knocked down someone less solid. Jax caught him, held him, father and son clinging to each other like drowning men who'd found shore. Maria watched them, her throat tight with emotions she couldn't name in this family that shouldn't exist, finding ways to hold together despite everything trying to tear them apart. It's over. Chen's voice beside Maria carried satisfaction and exhaustion in equal measure. The agent looked like she'd aged a decade tonight, like the adrenaline that had sustained her was finally crashing. Diego's going away forever. RICO charges trafficking, conspiracy, attempted murder, witness intimidation. We've got him on federal crimes across 3 states. There's no walking away this time. What about Connor and Maria? They're safe. Chen nodded, her expression softening slightly. Vipers are done. Diego was the last leader with enough reach to pose real threat. With him gone, the organization collapses. You'll still need to be careful, watch for revenge attempts from true believers, but the coordinated danger that ended tonight. Maria let herself believe it, let the tension she'd carried since finding Connor in that alley finally start to release. Beside her, Chen made calls coordinating evidence transport, prisoner processing, the machinery of federal justice grinding into motion. And in the parking lot's harsh light, Jax held his son and whispered things Maria couldn't hear, but understood anyway: apologies, promises, love expressed in words that came late, but still arrived before too late mattered. The federal courthouse in Phoenix looked like fortress, designed by committee concrete and glass, creating spaces meant to intimidate through sterile authority. 6 weeks after the truck stop arrests, Maria sat in the gallery watching Diego Reyes face justice for the third time in his criminal career. This time felt different. No cocky confidence, no expensive lawyers suggesting reasonable doubt, just exhausted man watching his empire burn to foundation. Connor testified, first voice steady despite visible trembling, describing the bus depot abduction, the hours of torture being dumped in an alley as message to his father. Defense attorneys tried to rattle him with aggressive cross-examinations, suggesting he was lying to protect Jax, but Connor held firm. His bruises had faded but not disappeared, photographic evidence showing healing injuries that corroborated every word. Maria went second, describing finding Connor, making the phone call, everything that followed. The defense painted her as opportunist waitress, hoping for reward money or relationship with biker, but Maria's steady recitation of facts undercut their implications. She was just person who'd helped when help was needed, witness to crimes rather than participant. Jax testified, last walking jury through brotherhood history, the split with Vipers. Jack's death, the original testimony, 5 years ago, Diego's campaign of intimidation that culminated in Connor's abduction. He wore button-down shirt instead of leather jacket, clean-shaven for court, but nothing could hide what he was: biker, former Marine man who'd lived violently and chosen differently. The recording played through courtroom speakers, Diego's voice captured by the wire, every threat and recruitment pitch preserved digitally. The jury listened with expressions ranging from disgust to fascination, civilians glimpsing criminal world they'd only imagined existed. Finn O'Brien testified too, explaining how Diego had faked his daughter's kidnapping with photographs that looked real enough to terrify, but depicted girl who wasn't actually Finn's child. The mechanic's voice broke, describing his betrayal, how he'd helped Diego track Connor and Maria because he thought his daughter's life depended on it. I was a coward, thought I was choosing my kid over brotherhood, but I was just choosing fear over courage. Jax showed me what real fatherhood looks like, protecting your child even when it costs everything. Defense rested without calling witnesses, their case hollowed out by overwhelming evidence. Closing arguments lasted 3 hours. Jury deliberated for 90 minutes. Verdict came back unanimous, guilty on all counts. RICO, conspiracy, trafficking, attempted murder. Witness intimidation, sentences stacked like bricks, building wall between Diego and freedom life, without parole becoming reality instead of threat. Diego stood for sentencing, his flat shark eyes finding Jax in the gallery, holding contact while judge read terms of imprisonment. You destroyed 2 brotherhoods. Hope it was worth it. Jax didn't flinch, didn't look away, his voice carrying across courtroom. Brotherhood was supposed to mean something. Honor, loyalty, protection. I didn't destroy it, I took it back. Marshals led Diego away, his expensive suit and dead eyes disappearing through door that led to holding cells and future measured in decades of concrete and bars. The gallery emptied slowly, people processing what they'd witnessed, justice rendered through testimony and recordings and federal law that moved slowly, but moved. Outside the courthouse, afternoon sun felt different than it had 6 weeks ago. Warmer, less harsh, like the world had shifted into gentler season. Connor stood between Jax and Maria, the 3 of them forming unit that hadn't existed 2 months ago, but felt inevitable now. It's really over. Connor's statement was question and declaration simultaneously. Jax's hand found his son's shoulder grip, firm but gentle. The trial's over. Diego's done. But healing, that takes longer. Therapy time, choosing every day to move forward instead of staying stuck in trauma. Are you stuck? The question caught Jax off guard, his gray eyes showing surprise before settling into honesty. Some days, I lost Jack, lost Sarah, lost 17 years with you. That doesn't go away because we won in court. But I'm learning that being stuck doesn't mean standing still. It means carrying weight while moving forward anyway. Maria watched father and son, their relationship still new and fragile, but growing stronger with each conversation, each moment of honesty. Connor looked at Jax with expression, mixing respect and uncertainty, teenager trying to reconcile ideal father with real man standing before him. Mom would have liked you, the version you're becoming, I mean. The man who chose justice over easy survival. Jax's face crumpled slightly before he controlled it, vulnerability flashing across features usually so carefully guarded. I wish I could have known her again. Wish I could have been there for both of you. Can't change the past, but we've got future. Simple words profound in their acceptance. Connor offering forgiveness, Jax hadn't asked for but desperately needed. They stood on courthouse steps, three people bound by crisis and choosing to stay connected beyond it, and Maria felt something shift in her chest. Recognition that her normal life wasn't coming back because she'd already built something better from its ruins. 6 months after Diego's sentencing, Iron Road Mechanics opened on Route 47, 15 miles from where Ruby's Diner still served coffee. Two truckers who pretended they didn't notice the boarded window had been replaced with bulletproof glass. The new shop occupied the salvaged clubhouse, its cinder block walls sandblasted clean of graffiti, its broken windows replaced, its parking lot repaved. The Iron Brotherhood logo remained above the entrance, but modified skull and crossed wrenches now accompanied by text reading, "Second chances start here." Maria managed the nonprofit side Second Chance Riders program, teaching at-risk youth motorcycle safety and mechanics. Connor had written the curriculum during final semester of high school, channeling his trauma into something productive, creating pathway for kids like he'd been lost alone, needing purpose, and people who gave a damn. Applications had flooded in from across 3 states, teenagers and young adults desperate for opportunity to learn trade that could lead to legitimate employment. Jax worked the shop floor most days teaching mechanics alongside Hawk and Ghost and 3 other former Brotherhood members who'd survived the Vipers War. They fixed bikes and cars, charged fair rates, donated services to veterans and families who couldn't afford repairs. The leather jackets stayed locked away, except for special occasions. They were mechanics, now small business owners, mentors to kids who needed stability more than they needed outlaw mystique. Maria stood in the shop's office reviewing grant applications, her hands free of Waitress grease but stained with printer ink from endless paperwork. Nonprofit management turned out to be mostly bureaucracy, filing reports, tracking outcomes, proving to funders that their money created measurable change. But occasionally she'd walk shop floor and see teenager mastering carburetor, rebuild watch Connor, teaching someone barely younger than himself, and remember why paperwork mattered. Maria, you busy. Connor appeared in doorway 19, now high school graduated with honors scholarship to Arizona State, studying engineering. He'd deferred enrollment for a year to help launch Second Chance Riders, wanted to see his curriculum work before leaving for college. The extra time had done him good, therapy sessions, twice weekly, nightmares down, from nightly to occasional smile reaching his eyes more often than not. Never too busy for you, what's up? Got 7 new applications today, 3 from Phoenix Group Homes, 4 from Clearwater Youth Detention referrals. Father Mike's working overtime spreading the word. Maria smiled, remembering the wild-bearded priest who'd sheltered them during crisis, who'd connected her to Uncle Ramon, who'd apparently adopted their nonprofit as personal mission. He showed up monthly with donations from parishioners and referrals from kids who needed what Second Chance Riders offered. We can take 5. Budget won't stretch to 7 unless we get the Henderson grant. About that, Connor pulled envelope from his back pocket, official letterhead, visible through window. Came this morning. I opened it because you said I could when it looked official. Maria took the envelope, scanning contents, her breath catching as she processed the number. 50,000. They're giving us 50,000. Annually for 3 years, renewable based on outcomes. We can take all 7 applicants plus expand in Nevada branch if we want. Maria's hands trembled slightly, overwhelmed by responsibility and possibility. She'd spent 28 years surviving, 3 years pouring coffee, 6 months building something that mattered. The transition felt surreal, like someone would wake her up and she'd find herself back at Ruby's $40 short on rent, wondering how waitresses became nonprofit directors. You okay? Connor's concern was genuine, this boy, who'd survived torture looking worried about woman who'd found him in alley. Maria laughed sharp sound, mixing relief and disbelief. Yeah, just processing that we're actually doing this, building something real. You built it, you and Dad. I just wrote curriculum. You wrote the heart of the program. Everything else is paperwork. Connor's expression shifted pride and vulnerability mixing. Mom would have been proud. What we're doing here helping kids like I was. She always wanted me to find purpose beyond survival. Maria stood crossing to hug him, this surrogate younger brother who'd become central to her life through accident and choice. She raised you right. Whatever else happened, she gave you foundation to build from. They stayed like that for a moment, two people who'd been alone, finding family and shared trauma and healing. Then Connor pulled back, grinning with mischief that made him look his actual age instead of decades older. Dad's looking for you, something about evening plans and dressing nice. Maria's stomach flipped, anticipation and nervousness combining. Her relationship with Jax had developed slowly, carefully, two damaged people learning to trust someone else with their scars. They'd been officially together for 4 months now, taking things at pace that felt right rather than rushing because trauma bonding created illusion of intimacy. She found him outside, standing beside his motorcycle, leather jacket on despite May heat. He'd cleaned up, beard-trimmed hair, combed, wearing shirt without grease stains. The sight made Maria smile, this man, who looked dangerous, trying so hard to appear date-appropriate. You look nice. Where are we going? Surprise, you trust me? Maria thought about the question seriously, about everything that had happened since she'd made a phone call in dark alley. Jax had protected her, involved her in decisions, shown her his worst parts, and accepted hers in return. He was patient with her trust issues, understanding when she needed space, present when she needed support. Yeah, I trust you. Relief flickered across his face, like the answer had mattered more than he'd admit. He handed her a helmet, helped her onto the bike behind him, waited until her arms wrapped around his waist before starting the engine. They rode towards Sunset Highway, unreeling beneath them, desert spreading in all directions, painted gold and purple by dying light. 20 minutes later, they arrived at Overlook. She'd never seen cliff edge, offering views across valley toward mountains. Hawk waited there beside truck, waving as they approached, his weathered face showing rare smile. Beside him stood Maria's Uncle Ramon, 14 years older but unmistakable, his missionary beard and sun-weathered skin making him look like prophet from ancient texts. Ramon, Maria's voice broke on his name, tears immediate and unexpected. Her uncle opened his arms and she fell into them, sobbing with relief and release, connection to family she'd thought permanently lost. He held her like she was fragile and precious, murmuring in Spanish about missed years in Providence and roads that circled back to where they should have led all along. Father Mike called me, told me what you've built, who you've become. I couldn't miss celebrating that. Behind them, more motorcycles arrived, Ghostfin Marcus, other Brotherhood members who'd survived the Viper's War and chosen legitimate path forward. They parked in semicircle, creating space that felt ceremonial, and Connor appeared from somewhere carrying cooler and blanket. The sun touched horizon light, shifting from gold to orange to purple, and Maria understood this was more than surprise date. It was gathering family, defining itself through choice rather than blood. Jax appeared beside her, his gray eyes soft in fading light. Wanted you to have this. People who matter, celebrating what matters. No crisis, no danger, just life. Maria finished for him, understanding clicking into place. They'd spent 6 months surviving, reacting, building from wreckage. This was first time they'd stopped to appreciate what they'd built, to gather people they loved, without trauma being the organizing principle. They ate sandwiches Hawk had brought, drank beer. Connor was too young for, but got anyway because rules felt negotiable at family gatherings. They talked about second chance riders, expansion, Connor's upcoming college semester, Ghost's tentative romance with woman who managed coffee shop in town. Ramon told stories about missionary work in Guatemala, about villages that needed everything and gave everything they had anyway, about faith, looking different than expected, but serving same purpose. As darkness fell and stars emerged, Connor stood, clearing throat with nervousness that suggested prepared speech. I wanted to say something. While everyone's here, conversation stopped, attention focusing on 19-year-old who'd survived more than most people twice his age. He looked at Jax, his expression mixing love and residual pain and hard-won acceptance. 6 months ago, I hated you. Blamed you for mom dying alone, for missing my childhood, for being everything she protected me from. I thought her death meant I'd never have family, never have father, never have people who chose me instead of being obligated. His voice strengthened, moving past grief towards something else. You proved me wrong, all of you. Maria found me and didn't have to. Dad protected me and didn't have to. Hawk Ghost Finn, you risked your lives for kid you'd never met. Uncle Ramon flew from Guatemala for someone he hadn't seen in 14 years. You chose me, chose us. Built family from nothing because families don't require blood, just commitment. He pulled folded paper from pocket, smoothing it carefully. I wrote this for English class last week. Teacher said it was too personal to share publicly. Figured this was better audience anyway. He read from paper, voice wavering but steady, words crafted by teenager processing trauma through poetry. Legacy isn't what you inherit. It's what you build from broken things, from missed connections and second chances, from finding family where family shouldn't exist. My legacy is leather jackets, teaching mechanics, is Waitress, managing nonprofits, is father learning fatherhood backward, is everyone who chose to stay when leaving was easier. That's legacy worth leaving. Silence followed, profound and complete. Maria felt tears on her cheeks, saw them on Jax's face too, saw grown bikers and missionaries crying openly without shame. Connor folded his paper, his voice dropping to whisper, I love you, Dad. Took me a long time to say it, but it's true. I love who you're becoming. I'm proud you're my father. Jack stood cross to his son, pulled him into embrace that lasted long enough for everyone to look away to give father and son privacy in public space. When they separated, both were crying and neither apologized. I love you too, son. I regret every year I missed with you. I regret your mom died without me knowing, without me helping, without me being there. But the testimony, the choices, the path that led here, it brought me to you, to Maria, to life worth living instead of just surviving. He looked around the gathering, his gray eyes reflecting firelight. Someone had started in portable pit. You're my legacy now. Not brotherhood, not reputation, not testimony. You, the man you're becoming. That's what I'll leave behind. Connor nodded acceptance, complete forgiveness, rendered through understanding that parents were humans doing their best with broken tools. They stood together, backlit by fire and stars, and Maria felt the moment crystallize into memory that would sustain through whatever came next. Later, after others had left and Connor had driven home in truck, Maria and Jax remained at Overlook, watching stars emerge in desert sky unpolluted by city lights. She leaned against him, his arm around her shoulders, both content in silence that required no filling. Thank you. For tonight. For everything. Jax's voice rumbled through his chest, vibrating against her ear. Thank you for making that phone call, for staying when you should have run, for choosing this mess over normal life. Normal's overrated. This is better. They sat until cold drove them toward motorcycle, toward ride home through darkness that felt safe, now familiar. Maria held tight to Jax's waist, face pressed against leather that smelled like gasoline and sage, and thought about the phone call she'd made in dark alley 6 months ago. Simple choice: help someone or walk away. She'd chosen help, and that choice had led here to family, built from crisis to life that mattered beyond survival. Iron Road Mechanics glowed in distance, its lights visible from highway beacon, advertising redemption available to anyone willing to work for it. Second Chance Riders logo reflected streetlight, motorcycle, and crossed wrenches, symbol of machinery, as salvation rather than destruction. Maria saw it and felt pride mixing with exhaustion, satisfaction mixing with awareness that good work was never finished, that helping people required constant choosing to stay present instead of running. But she was good at staying now, good at choosing people over safety, good at building family from unlikely materials, bikers and teenagers and waitresses who'd stumbled into each other's lives through accident, improvidence, and phone calls made in dark alleys. Jax parked behind the shop, killing engine silence, rushing in to fill space previously occupied by mechanical growl. They climbed off bike, neither rushing toward door, both comfortable, existing in moment without needing it to become something else. You ever regret it, the brotherhood? The life before me? Maria's question surprised her with its boldness, but Jax didn't flinch. I regret missing 17 years with Connor. Regret Kate died alone, but the brotherhood, the testimony, the choices that brought me here, every single one, because they led to you, to Connor, to this. He gestured at shop at Second Chance Riders logo at life they'd built from wreckage. Was it worth the Kwayeteon? Every sacrifice, every risk, every choice, because you can't outrun your past, but you can choose what future you build from it. You can choose who you become. You can choose legacy worth leaving. Maria kissed him, then slow and certain, two people finding each other through darkness and choosing to stay found. The desert wind carried sage smell, coyotes called in distant hills, highway hummed with trucks, moving through night toward destinations that mattered to someone. And in small shop on Route 47, family built from broken things slept peacefully, knowing that morning would bring new challenges, but also new chances that redemption was daily choice rather than destination. Sometimes doing the right thing made dangerous enemies, but sometimes it made family instead, made purpose, made life worth living instead of just surviving. Maria Santos had made a phone call. She'd found a dying boy, called his father, chosen to help instead of walking away. That choice had cost her normal life, her job, her invisibility. But it had given her Connor and Jax and Uncle Ramon and Second Chance Riders, had given her family when she thought she'd always be alone. That was legacy worth leaving. Not what you inherited, but what you built, from broken things, from missed connections, and second chances from staying when leaving was easier. She held Jax's hand and walked into Iron Road Mechanics, into home that smelled like motor oil and coffee and possibility. Behind them, desert stretched endlessly, beautiful and indifferent. Ahead, tomorrow waited with all its challenges and opportunities. And in present moment, Maria Santos was exactly where she needed to be, with people she'd chosen and who'd chosen her back. The story that began with phone call in dark alley ended here, not with perfect resolution or happily ever after, but with family gathered around motorcycle shop, with teenager writing poetry about legacy, with father learning fatherhood backward, with Waitress becoming nonprofit director, with Marines teaching mechanics to kids who needed second chances. Ended with choosing to stay found instead of running, with building futures from past wreckage, with understanding that brotherhood meant protecting each other even when protection cost everything. Ended with Maria Santos, Connor Brennan, and Jax Ryder standing together under desert stars, unlikely family forged from crisis and sustained by choice, proof that sometimes the hardest roads led home.